It may be his greatest mistake. The Church orders him to cease teaching that the Earth orbits the Sun. But Galileo pushes his luck. 9 years later, he asks to state his case again. This time, a new pope is a personal friend, and Galileo wins permission to write a book. Ever scornful of opponents, Galileo writes a dialogue and places arguments for the two sides in the mouths of characters who are thinly disguised.
When he wrote his books, it was very clear who was the smart one, who was the stand-in for Galileo, while the Aristotelians come out as the fools.
In 1633, Galileo is arrested by the Inquisition. The Church accuses him of heresy. But perhaps the real reason that Galileo is brought to trial is that he has gone too far in his efforts to persuade. Galileo has put one of the Pope's favorite arguments into the mouth of a foolish character in his dialogue.
The Pope was told by people around him that Galileo had tried in the book to make the Pope look a fool. And it was his personal decision to prosecute Galileo to the hilt and have him in house arrest for the rest of his life. It was not really a church decision. It was the Pope's personal decision out of solid anger toward a friend.
Galileo expects a simple compromise. Instead, he is threatened with torture. Bowing to the inevitable, he falls to his knees and recants. For his last 8 years, Galileo lives under house arrest, a broken man. He will gain immortal fame for championing the view that the Earth moves around the Sun. But to the scientists who succeed him, his greatest achievement is different. In his final years, he writes a book that completes the work that he began while young. He shows how it is possible to use mathematics to analyze motion. Ironically, the year Galileo dies, a boy is born 800 miles away who will bring Galileo's ideas to completion. He will also be one of the strangest scientists of all time. Perhaps no scientist has ever worked so hard without regard for food, sleep, or human relations as Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton was a much darker figure. He was a loner. He was pathologically incapable of small talk.
We would use the term obsession. I would say he's the closest example I can think of someone who was consumed by his work.
He may also be the greatest scientist of all time. When he is born, the physical world is barely understood. Yet by the time he dies, he's worked out the precise laws that describe all motion, from the fall of an apple to the orbits of planets.
There just hasn't been another human being we know of quite like Newton.
In 1642, Isaac Newton is born in a remote English village. His childhood is an unhappy one. His father dies before he's born, and when he is just 3, his mother farms him out to a stern Puritan grandmother.
When his mother remarried and left him with his grandmother, Newton felt betrayed and isolated, and I think he never quite got over that.
He will later write that his childhood sins included threatening to burn his mother and stepfather in their house. Newton does not always do well in school, but he becomes a curiosity in his village for building extraordinary mechanical devices such as windmills. A schoolmaster convinces his mother to send him to university. At Trinity College, Cambridge, most students drink and carouse more than they study. Newton prefers to be isolated and alone.
Here, looking around him, were a lot of people who had not the least interest in books, who came from well-off families. He must have felt terribly out of place. And also, I suspect, knowing the way that students work, he must have been regarded as an oddball.
Newton, a Puritan, is obsessed with sin. He adopts strict emotional and sexual limits and lives a reclusive, monk-like existence.
Newton was so different from Galileo because Newton was one of the most private people that you would ever know about.
He didn't take pains to make friends, and somehow he didn't relate easily to people. He just pulled back from them.
Throughout his entire life, he has no love affairs and few friends. Some scholars speculate that Newton was homosexual. Others that he simply decides he has no time for anything but work. It is believed he dies a virgin. In school, Newton pours all of his passion into his studies. Like Galileo, he's captivated by mathematics. He learns advanced math on his own. And then he begins to create a new mathematics to analyze motion. He invents calculus. Newton is fascinated by the way the sun rises and sets in an unbroken arc.
Newton's brilliant insight was the fact that when objects move, they can be viewed incrementally, piece by piece, tiny little increments at a time. And when you add up this motion, you get beautiful spirals, you get ellipses, you get circles. And just remember that when Isaac Newton was scribbling down all his notes, he was creating calculus at the rate at which freshmen in college learn it.
Had he told anyone, he would have been recognized as the greatest mathematician in Europe. But Newton keeps his discoveries to himself, preferring to work out the details alone. Several years later, at age 24, Newton is living in his mother's house. Here, he has an inspiration that will revolutionize all of physics. He will unlock the mystery of what makes the planets move.
Isaac Newton viewed the world pictorially, geometrically, and one day while walking down his estate, he saw an apple fall. And then he gazed up and he saw the moon. And then he asked the key question, the question that unlocked the secret of the heavens. If an apple falls, does the moon also fall? And then perhaps one of the greatest flashes of insight, he realized that gravity, which then takes an apple and makes it fall to the earth, is the same force that could grab the moon in the heavens, and make the moon fall around the earth.
While Galileo began the study of how gravity acts on Earth, Newton is the first to recognize that gravity also moves the planets and stars.
This was an absolutely world-shaking change. Newton essentially showed that the laws of the heavens were the same as the laws